This episode was recorded September 16th, 2025. Hey everyone, Nick Reagan with Live 5 News and the host of We the Palmetto. Now periodically we like to take a step back and analyze a race from 30,000 feet. In this bonus episode of We the Palmetto, that's exactly what we're going to do for the upcoming 2026 South Carolina governor's race. We'll likely do more of these check-ins every other month or so, just to see how the race evolves as we get closer to primary season. So lock in because here we go. We talked to Lowcountry voters. Trump was in true campaign form. Voting is officially underway. Joe Biden spoke here in the heart of downtown.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Joining me now is Dr. Mark Owens. He is the assistant professor of political science at the Citadel. First and foremost, thanks for coming on. Thanks for joining me and walking us through where we are in the governor's race right now.
Thanks. This is a great show to be part of.
Yeah, okay. So we are talking about the governor's race. We are a little more than a year out, a year and about a month or so before the general election, before we get a new governor in South Carolina. However, before that is going to be the primary, the Republican primary, the Democratic primary will go on at the same time. That's probably where we're going to see the next governor elected. We can talk about the Democrats in a bit, but they do have a very uphill battle. But let's lay the groundwork here. The candidates that have announced, I've got them listed here. We've got Representative Nancy Mace, Representative Ralph Norman, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott, the Attorney General Alan Wilson, and then State Rep Josh Kimbrell. Have we missed anyone? As far as you know.
Not right now. I mean, this has been a really interesting state compared to others across the country, is that so many people who currently hold office are considering running for the chief executive position.
Yeah, it is definitely very interesting. Now, granted, filing technically has not opened for the governor's race. I think it opens sometime in maybe April of next year. So we don't know who is officially in or out, but these are the candidates that have definitely made announcements. They've done campaign speeches to say, here's what we're doing. And here's why you should vote for me. But let's just start with your general overview here. How are things shaping up, a year out from the general election?
So right now, one of the concerns that we've really had as a public is that when we have an election, we start to wonder who's running next. And that has really pushed a lot of the candidates to make their announcements this summer. Part of that is because Congress was in recess. The others, the legislative session had ended. And they want to define and say what they're going to be doing ahead of time. So this is one of those pre-primary phases that is important just for increasing name recognition.
Yeah, we already have some big names that are in the race. Do you think that any of them right now has a clear lead or advantage?
Yeah. One of the advantages that sort of early polls would show is that Representative Mace tends to be the most well-known of the candidates, into the news most often, but also most people have an opinion of her. Whereas most of the other candidates, the real opportunity that they have is how they're going to introduce themselves. And so Lieutenant Governor Abbott and also Alan Wilson tend to be in this second and third role because they can be known by individuals who follow state politics, and they're more positive in their public beliefs.
You've taken a look at all of their opening statements, all of their initial sort of positioning here. One thing that strikes me, and I don't think that it should strike anyone necessarily, but is that all of them are extremely pro-Trump conservative Republicans. One of their big messages that you hear from every one of them is, I'm Trump's candidate, right? Or I am the Trump candidate. And I just wonder, when you look at sort of that being a primary basis for many of these candidates, how do these guys separate themselves and make themselves different from the next Trump candidate?
It's a great question because, think about what they say next. And I think this is almost the easiest part. Is the second and third thing the candidates say is usually when they differentiate themselves. They're all going to emphasize a lot of attention right now to the president as the head of the national party, but also it's because I wouldn't expect that endorsement to come until very late in the primary. He's getting all the attention he wants right now of sort of them focusing in on what policies there are. But it is to say that law and order, if that is something that we associate with the Attorney General, this is going to give Alan Wilson a real opportunity of showing how he's involved as South Carolina had court cases against the Biden administration. What were we doing? The other part for the lieutenant governor is to remind everybody we've had such economic growth in the last 8 years, and to try and really claim credit for those.
So from your assessment, Alan Wilson is sort of the law and order candidate. Pamela Evitt is the businesswoman candidate.
Yeah.
Where do you see the other three? I mean, Nancy Mace has kind of tried to dive into both of those piles. And then you've got folks like Josh Kimbrell, which I think maybe is still struggling to present a very clear message. But, where do you see them?
Representative Mace is really focused in on, she's been the first one to attack a lot of the candidates. One is to really go at the law and order question for Attorney General Wilson, but also to present how in D.C. she's able to help craft what President Trump is doing for the country and sending resources back to D.C.
Interesting.
Very similar to what Representative Norman could do, but the two of them separate differently. If you sort of think later in their introductory speeches, Representative Mace said we need to cut boards across in the state where the public gets to be involved in decision making, because that would help save money. Ralph Norman thought we need to fill all these boards with the public so they get a choice on how they're going to spend the people's money. And so, well, that might not seem like a huge deal. He's looking for something which is to try and say, how do I bring everyone together towards his conservative policy? But Representative Mace is pointing to the fact of no apologies, this is what we will do. And Josh Kimbrell is looking for almost reaching back to the past. He knows that this is in Columbia, and he's going to do the work that Governor Carol Campbell had done before, when the Republican Party had different wings, and how do they bring them together and also perhaps bring Democrats alongside to improve the state.
I want to go back to Representative Norman for just a moment, because he's a very interesting candidate in this race, being the only person that supported Nikki Haley in the last presidential election. But he also didn't incur sort of the wrath from President Trump that other candidates in other places got when they went against him. I think he's a unique figure because he's almost the most conservative of the conservatives out there. Do you see his platform as being able to resonate with voters, and does his association with Nikki Haley put him in a difficult spot at all?
It's sort of what he can transcend the relationship with Nikki Haley. I think she has come out and endorsed him. So has Senator Jim DeMint from the past. And where he is this idea, we could say conservative, it's really focusing on the deficit hawk, the connection to the Freedom Caucus. Remember, he initially opposed the One Big Beautiful bill because of its spending, and then was a single point for negotiation until he voted yes. And that is where his relationship has been as one of the negotiators with President Trump. To get the legislation passed. I think he's loyal in that, but obviously he's someone not to be ignored in the negotiations in D.C.
Well, let's talk about polls for a moment, because you already brought it up. Nancy Mace did see some success in one of the early polls. Now, to be candid, it was an internal poll, but she does say that the pollsters that did that most recent poll, which I think came from about August-ish, it's the same pollster that does all the polling for like the Lindsey Graham campaign, and President Trump retweeted the data results, which is a big success for her to get, for any of these candidates to get a retweet from the president is big for their campaigns. It has her up over Alan Wilson by 5 to 10 points or something like that. We've also seen in the past when Alan Wilson released an internal poll, showed him on top. I'm curious if we should be taking any stock in these polls this early just yet.
I think at one point we'd say no. I mean, we don't even know what the full ballot might be. And one of the things that comes to this is we don't know how much the public is actually thinking about who they're going to vote for in June of 2026. But these are interesting parts if we're to lock in who's the front runner, and if nothing changed in the campaign, if everyone campaigned just as hard as each other, or there's no surprise between now and then she's in a very good position, because the key is to be in the top two candidates to make the runoff with many numerous candidates who could win.
Well, and the big part about all of these polls to me is that the vast vote getter in these polls is those who are undecided.
know, right?
It's like 40% undecided. So, I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room here.
It is. And it's to say, if I'm undecided right now, then I'm going to have to take the time to look at everybody, right? And so
Right.
when the campaigns begin, they're really focused in on that number of individuals, people who don't have an impression yet of who these 5 people are, the 2 congressmen, the 2 executives in Columbia, and the state representative.
We've recently saw the outcry over the Charlie Kirk shooting, right? All of these candidates are trying to get out ahead of this, and to some extent use this to motivate their base to say, hey, we're doing something here. Do you think that, the death of Charlie Kirk is going to play a role at all in distinguishing these candidates?
The way I think that the candidates are looking at this right now is trying to see how the public reacts. And then in that moment, they would wonder, as a leader, how do they speak into that context? Right? Are there voices that they don't agree with, right? In this case, we're trying to wonder with decorum and other responses, what's a respectful way to deal with the passing of somebody? Also, what is the best way to help someone grieve? And these are questions which have shown like how hands-on someone wants to be, right, as to this opportunity. But I think that what has been most important for primary voters is that they feel like someone is there grieving with them. And very soon, it's going to come to a larger conversation. This is one of many events that's happened across the country. How do they make sure that something like that would not happen in their state?
Do you think that something like the death of Charlie Kirk could possibly motivate a new voter base to participate in a midterm election that usually sees a lower voter turnout?
One of the hard parts from political science that might say that this is not likely to occur is because of how far this is from the primary.
Sure.
So it will be part of the national memory. Is just to say that typically we focus on things that happen 2 to 4 weeks before.
Sure.
And it's the economy, how many people in this case are impacted on it and are going to think differently about who the leaders are.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, recency bias generally tends to move the needle a little bit. I mean, I think we saw that a little bit when in Trump's first election, when a couple weeks before the election, more information about Hillary Clinton came out, right? Like that was cited by Democrats as a big reason why she potentially lost that election. So, yeah.
And to your point, one of the things that this does do right now is to ask, as he is a friend to the president, what are they doing to be the president's friend, right? And are they showing themselves in something that is not public policy related as being aligned with the White House?
Let's talk about money because I guess this month, we saw Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett. She put out $1 million in ad spending. My interpretation of that is that she's trying to get her name out there, especially with some of those recent polls that show that people don't really know who she is. What's your take on spending $1 million more than a year away from the election?
Yeah, I think there are a couple strategies to consider. One, she really wants to get her name to be the first name that people think about in that larger group we just talked about, the undecideds. And she gets to set a tone right now before any of the other candidates have really focused in on pointing out anything negative towards her. She's really just talking about her strength as a businesswoman and as the lieutenant governor. And that is a powerful place to be. It is to say that you spend money, you get extra attention, and you go out and try and earn more money. But also she could be spending it on ads right before the primary, which is a real detriment of buying that turf away from the other campaigns.
All of these candidates are strong campaigners. They're strong fundraisers. I don't know what that word is supposed to be. They're good at getting people to donate to their campaigns. Do we have any idea yet just how big some of their war chests are right now, and potentially whether or not donors are already lining up for a candidate or not?
At this point, it's sort of too early to say, but very soon, in the next couple weeks, like mid-October, as we might have discussed just before the show, it's like, yes, we will get to know what the initial list is. And these are the strongest first supporters that they're going out and identifying right now. But if we look back into the past, before South Carolina elections started raising so much money anyway, Alan Wilson can raise millions of dollars. Nancy Mace can raise millions of dollars, and she did 2 years ago just for a primary. it is Ralph Norman can raise millions of dollars, even though he says he's going to be behind everybody, right? He knows these individuals and they have decades of experience working in South Carolina politics. So this idea for them is just about when they can get these donations. And I think that it's going to push this to be one of the most expensive elections that we've seen in South Carolina.
That's an interesting take for sure. I think you're right. I believe the third quarter finance reports are due on October 10th or something like that. So hopefully around then we'll be able to. I think that'll be a good test of who's winning sort of the persuasion war, if you will, among these Republican donors that aren't going to give to everyone, but they may give to one or even two candidates.
And pledging to the future, these candidates are setting up different PACs and potentially being aligned with other groups. It is wild now to think about compared to just what we would have seen when Nikki Haley was running a decade ago.
Yeah. Walk me through whether or not Democrats have a chance at all in this governor's race.
Yeah. The Democrats are clearly going to be focused on their chances rest on who wins the nomination. And I think it rests on how unified the Republican Party becomes around that new nominee. If this campaign, which may spend a lot of money, gets very divisive and one wing of this party, which has many factions, starts to distrust the other, then they wonder, could Democrats nominate somebody to appeal to that candidate? So I think it's right now the Democrats have focused on trying to recruit one candidate, right, a state representative, and we'll see how that happens.
I think the only Democratic candidate right now is Mullins-McLeod, but Jermaine Johnson is considering a run as well. Should we be worried that there hasn't been a candidate that has come out to say I'm running yet, or do we sort of have, again, sort of the recency bias of all of these Republicans showing up super early?
Yeah, it hits to us a part where it's a difficult thing that the party's going to have to work through right now. Is that other candidates don't see this right now as a race to jump into. It might be better to stay in the position that they have. But there are two choices to run, right? I mean, Democrats are also trying to find someone to run for the Senate and run for the governor at the same time and other offices.
Other states around us, I think of Georgia with Stacey Abrams or Kentucky with Andy Beshear. In North Carolina, their governor, I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, Josh Stein. Yeah. Those are all Democrats that have either won or, in Stacey Abrams' case, came very, very close to winning in deep red states. Why have we not seen that in South Carolina? It seems like every statewide Democrat that runs in a statewide race doesn't even really come close.
Yeah, there was a lot of national attention towards Jamie Harrison, but then the results weren't there.
Yeah.
And so the interesting part for us is we don't know if he's trying to work on something, right? I mean, what gets handed off, whereas Texas sees Beto O'Rourke remain involved. And, in the same part, Stacey Abrams, that idea of finding individuals and finding cities which have concentrations of both parties to make sure that people feel like they're heard. And so that is a grassroots approach that I think ultimately this could be an election where someone builds that. It is to say that has to involve a lot of different issues. Whereas candidates who are running for the Senate, some of them are involved in nonprofits and grassroots organizations nationally that are focused on single issues, right? If we think about gun control and Amy Andrews. And so the response, what will it grow out beyond that? Because that is something that's going to attract a lot of national attention. And those movements received a lot of out-of-state money.
Well, I just go back to thinking about people like Joe Cunningham, right? He seemed like he could have mounted a strong challenge to the governor's race. Jamie Harrison, again, seemed like he was going to mount a strong challenge to Lindsey Graham 6 years ago when the election happens. But it just doesn't seem to materialize. Do you think that the Democrats in this state lack sort of leadership to get a grassroots movement going?
So at this point, we get a bigger conversation. Not they lack a leadership, but it's a question too of where to do this. Do they want to have their party to be or essentially as an opposition to the National Republican Party, or is there a South Carolina specific definition, which is going to some of their last success? Right, does go back to the beginning of the 2000s, right, with Fritz Hollings, and so that's just somebody you knew, and it didn't matter where the National Party was. That would be the individual connected through decades. But that's unique, but also that's sort of a burden they have to figure out what's the new thing.
They need to come together and figure out where they're going, and probably honestly just have a much stronger direction for everybody to kind of coalesce behind.
Yeah, and it's different because it worked for Joe Biden when he ran essentially as an alternative to Donald Trump.
Right.
But that didn't necessarily work. He didn't win South Carolina through that, right?
Right.
And it's sort of one of those things where this election is going to be set with 2 years left of President Trump's term, but people are still going to have a question of what about the last 2 years that you're going to serve as governor? And someone can have a very clear message to speak to independents about that. They'd have a chance.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start to wrap this up here. Give me sort of a one-liner, if you will, for how each one of these candidates either wins or what they need to do next to increase their chances in becoming a final two candidate in June.
Yeah. So right now, to go, I guess, in order, if we're trying to think of constitutional office, but Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott has to, right now, starting out where you would have expected the frontrunner to do it, it's spend first. She has to keep spending, though. This is a huge responsibility to make sure that if she wants to be in the top two, she has to stay there with everybody else coming and spending money to get into that position. Whereas right now, Attorney General Alan Wilson will always be somewhere into the top three in people's knowledge of him. And so it's to remain consistent in that and perhaps identify that people see him not just as someone who's focused in on the law, but in fact now making decisions that are going to come to him from the legislature. And so those are great points where he can remind us of what he has done, but also show the relationships he has across the state.
Yeah.
And we think about to the representatives, right? Representative Mace is going to focus in so much more on being a fighter, right? To stay in the news. She is the newsmaker of this election so far, but it's also to make sure that this can be connected to policy and ultimately what Washington, D.C. is bringing to South Carolina.
Yeah, she wants to make news, but she almost doesn't want to make too much news since she has such a grasp on it already. Yeah. What about Ralph Norman?
He, interestingly, you almost look to one of the older candidates might be your grassroots candidate, right? He can move around the state and utilize the meetings that are happening sometimes to an outsider view within the Republican Party, right? And he's being able to show that. He also has a unique history of going back a little bit longer into when he was in the state legislature that he can draw from of different stories. And so that connection can be interesting to build. And so I think he's slowly working that in. And when we come to really think about Josh Kimbrell, it is reminding people that politics can be something, right, number one, that we aspire to, right? The fact of an executive could be someone that's a listener, but I think ultimately he's going to get our attention with that. And then people are going to wonder, what is the decision you're going to make? Yeah. Because South Carolina has, at least in the last 10 years, we have seen, or when he serves the governor, who maybe focuses a little bit more on the grace and how he shows himself publicly, being open to the state, right, and also being sort of true to these principles. And that is an interesting take right now where it's harder for someone to be loud, and there really is a South Carolina way of doing politics.
Yeah, I think he probably needs to be a little bit more loud and grab a couple more headlines. But you're right, he does have sort of that I'm the local guy in the state house that could maybe shake things up. So those are the five candidates. Is it five or six? Five candidates. Those are the five candidates. But do you expect that we'll see anybody else, or is this the ballot?
I think right now this is the ballot. It would take someone, which could be a wild card in the way that believes so much in themselves that they think they have something that none of these candidates do.
Yeah.
And because one of the things about term limits that exists is a lot of these candidates have known about this election and when there'll be an open seat for them to run. It is Representative Norman has talked about it's been a dream to be the governor of South Carolina, and he knew this would be that chance in his career. And so I think that's true for all the others.
So short of, I don't know, what's the wildest thing we could say? Tim Scott getting into the governor's race.
Yep.
This is probably the ballot.
I think so. Right.
Yeah.
It is. He's doing a lot of great things in D.C., but ultimately these candidates will also, if anyone starts to show interest, they're going to, if they think they're in the running spot, they're going to start thinking about how they want to fill out the other leadership positions in the state, like who could be their lieutenant governor.
Right.
I think there's a lot of the rest of the ballot to fill out. Who's going to run? We have some candidates who are running for attorney general.
Yep.
And then we think about this other question is to remind everybody about accounting, right? I mean, some of the state senators might be running for the state treasurer. And we're going to wonder about some of the biggest stories that we've had in the last 4 years.
Some like mysterious money that
It's true.
is in bank accounts and then not in bank accounts, and crazy stuff up in Columbia. Yeah, and I definitely think I was just joking when I said that Tim Scott could run for governor. I mean, he could, but he probably has his sights set on another presidential run in 4 years. But we'll see.
And this kind of an election gives him a chance to wonder, like, is he kind of a kingmaker within our state?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be there helping Lindsey Graham run as well, but that won't be his only interest in the election.
Yeah, much like Jim Clyburn for the Democrats, presidential candidates as well. Okay, well, Dr. Mark Owens, thanks.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Enjoyed it.